In this video, I'm going to go over all the different ways you can select things in Adobe Photoshop. There are so many interesting selection tools that you can use, so let's dive in. A lot of your selection tools are going to be in this default section, kind of these top 3 up here, and there's going to be some options underneath each one of these top 3 options as well. So in general, we're typically on the move tool, and that's just going to select your layer, and we're going to be able to move it around. You can also change your default from selecting by layer to selecting by groups. If you're working with a lot of groups and you want to keep them together, you can change this to group, and then every time you select, it will select the full group as opposed to a single layer. Now this one is our rectangular marquee tool. You can get to this by pressing M on your computer, and then you can also change it to an elliptical marquee tool, a single row, or a single column marquee tool. And this basically acts exactly as you think it will. So it just makes a rectangle. If you change it to the elliptical marquee tool, it's going to select in an ellipse. If you press Shift and hold it, it will keep it at a circle. And in the same vein, if you press Shift with the rectangular, it will keep it to square. You can also change it up here to fixed ratio or fixed size. So fixed ratio will mean that you're constantly selecting only in a specific ratio, or if you change it to fixed size, then you're only selecting a fixed size. This can really help you. For instance, I'm a wedding invitation designer, so I need things to be like 5:7 ratio. So I can change it to either that size or ratio, and I know I'm always selecting within that 5:7 size or within that ratio and can manipulate it to that right size later. All of your selection tools, you can use hold down Shift to add to them and subtract from them. If you hold down Alt, that will subtract anything that you select, and you can mix and match this with tools. So if you want to do this weird rectangular shape, but you also want to add kind of an ellipse shape, I can just press Shift now that I'm on the ellipse tool, and it will continue to add in that same way. If you use these 4 different options at the top, it will change how the adding and subtracting works when you're working with different shapes. But keep in mind, you can add and subtract with all of the different selection tools that we're talking about, so you don't only have to do that with the rectangular marquee tool. The second one here is the lasso tool. It can also be polygonal or magnetic lasso. Polygonal is so hard to say. So the standard lasso, you can just draw around anything that you want. Say we wanted to get rid of this butterfly, we could just do that. The polygonal one is a little bit easier to use. Every click is going to draw a line between that click and the previous click, so you don't have to like hold down anything like you do with the regular lasso. So every time I click, it's going to basically create a new edge for this polygon we're building. And whenever you have anything selected by any of these tools, if you go back to the move tool, you can move that around. So this is really helpful, especially if we wanted to like move this butterfly around within the flower arrangement. That's going to keep them all on the same layer, so you don't have to create a new layer in order to do that. You can just select anything and then use the move tool. Now the magnetic lasso is kind of interesting. I'm going to zoom in so we can see this. And when you click, it's going to try and magnet to the edge of what it thinks. So it's going to use a little magic here. So I'm not clicking anything or holding anything. I'm just moving my mouse as close to the edges of this red flower that I can and trying to get it to magnet on here. So this is something you can use for more complex shapes. It can be a little bit difficult, and you'll want to go really slowly. As you can see, it's getting a little confused with that reddish stem versus the reddish flower. But this can be an option that you use to select some of those more intricate shapes if you're not finding luck with any of the other selection tools. Let's just go back over here. So you can see we were able to select pretty nicely the edge of that flower, not 100%. Like if I were able to delete it, you can see we've still got some red. So it's not perfect, but it's pretty good for something like this. It would work even better on this butterfly because this butterfly is surrounded by white, and so there's a lot of contrast between what you're trying to select and the background. However, we don't really need it on the butterfly because it's not touching anything else on here. So as we showed you earlier, you could just use the regular or polygonal lasso tools. Lastly, we have our magic wand tool, and this also can be the object selection tool or the quick selection tool. So the magic wand tool is going to try and just kind of select based on a color range. You can change the tolerance of it up here, and you'll see kind of what that means. So if I try to select all of the white, you can see we're doing a pretty good job of getting pretty much everything in the background of this image, but there are some white dots. This is a scan of a vintage watercolor, so of course there's going to be a few other things. However, if we just try to select the butterfly, you can see we're kind of getting some different results based on the color ranges. So what we could do is we could increase the tolerance a little bit, and that might do a better job. You can also press Shift and just add some of this color range in here. Again, you can build the selection from all the different tools. So if we go into the marquee tool and I just click Shift, I can make sure we're including all of those little dots that we might have missed. And then we can go back to the magic wand tool and select this little bit. And then now we have pretty much selected the edge, just the butterfly's wings, in case we want to do something specific with those. Whenever you are selecting something, you'll find that if you go and try to do something else, you have to go in and kind of deselect that selection first. So if you do select something, make sure you kind of click again to deselect, or you can press Escape to deselect that. The quick selection tool is similar to the magic wand tool, but you can actually kind of just like drag it to try and select things. If I wanted to add this guy to it and kind of drag around, and you can see even though when I was dragging, it went outside of his body, it's smart enough to kind of get back in here. It touched this green leaf, but it was smart enough to know that I didn't actually want that green leaf. Let's see how it does. As you can see, it's really selecting like by color range for these flowers, and as I drag, it's kind of adding in new color range. So I love this quick selection tool. It is absolutely amazing. And then you can up here change whether dragging adds to it or subtracts. So we can then drag around here to subtract our butterfly from the selection that we already had. I think our tolerance is really low, so it's going a little slowly. That's okay. So now we just have this flower selected, and you can see how much easier that was than using that magnetic lasso tool. So absolutely love the magic wand tools of all sorts in the quick selection tool. Now the third option here, the object selection tool, is going to be also really cool, and it's going to give you kind of a little preview of what it's trying to select. So this actually is the easiest way to select that butterfly. And you can select a lot of different things. You can see it's taking a long time for that larger piece, but you'll see what it's trying to select in the pink, and you get a little preview of that, which is really helpful. Now these are just the 3 selection tools that are automatically in your panel, but you also have an entire selection panel, and you can do a lot of things by like selecting by certain layers, isolating layers. You can also select a color range, for instance. So I can click on this red, and now we've selected that color range alone. Again, in this one, you can use this little plus tool to kind of add different levels of selection to your selection. So you can do a bunch of different color ranges. This one, as we have all those reddish colors together, we can do select similar. And as you see, that expands to pretty much anything in that kind of reddish color scheme, even some of these over here on this butterfly or moth. You can also select the subject, pretty easy in this one, but will be more impressive when you use an image and you have a background as well. And you can also select sky, which is really cool. Now, say you do build up kind of a very specific selection. For instance, you grab this entire flower and it takes you a little while to get that whole thing, and then you have to unselect certain parts of it too. You eventually get exactly the selection that you want. Then in the select panel, you can also save the selection, and simultaneously you can load a past selection. So if you do have something where you're going to be working, entirely with these red flowers, you could select both of them. It might take you a while to get the exact perfect selection on those, but then you can actually save that selection in case you need to come back to it later. So overall, tons of selection tools in Photoshop, which is awesome because there's so many different ways in which you want to edit. And then once you have selected things, as I showed you with the butterfly, you can move them around. You can also apply different edits specifically just to your selection. You can mask your selection. You can do some manual editing without going outside that layer. So if we wanted to kind of color in some of this red without accidentally coloring on the leaves, we could do that a little bit. And then of course you can make your selections into additional layers. So you can make all of the red a separate layer from the rest of it. You can make both the butterflies a separate layer from the rest of it, and then make all the edits that you want to those different layers. So many things you can do here, and selecting the right thing is going to be the first key to making all of that happen. So if this was helpful in getting comfortable with Photoshop, I have a ton of other graphic design tutorials here on my channel. And if you are interested in becoming a graphic designer or a stationery designer, check out some of our resources that are linked below.